This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We begin with breaking news tonight. The province says it will not provide money for a search of the Prairie Green landfill where the bodies of 2 First Nations women are believed to be. Provincial officials met today with First Nations leaders and the families of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron. The province says while they are waiting for the federal government to make a decision on whether to search, they cannot knowingly risk the health and safety of Manitoba workers for a search without a guarantee of finding remains. In May, a feasibility study showed a search could take up to 3 years and cost up to $184 million. CBC spoke with Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief Kathy Merrick just moments after the province put out its statement.
What are your thoughts on it?
Well, it's bullshit. Because the feasibility study was conducted by experts. We had an anthropologist on the technical working group, and we realized as well as to, and those issues reflect in the study as to what can be done, as to what preventative measures can be taken not to put anybody at risk. So that homework is done, and I'm pretty shocked that those issues would come forward now in terms of the province making those comments.
The province says if the federal government funds a search, the Manitoba government will not block the use of Manitoba workers at the site, but would expect sufficient safeguards to be in place beforehand. Well, to the aftermath of yesterday's massive warehouse fire in Point Douglas now. Here is a look at what remains of that warehouse complex from above. This was shot just hours ago from our CBC drone team. Investigators are still looking into the cause of the blaze, but as CBC's Cameron McLean reports, residents in the area worry they could be looking at the mess left behind for a long time.
This is what fire crews were contending with for hours yesterday. When she heard the old Vulcan Ironworks building was on fire, Catherine Flynn had one thought.
Ugh, not again.
Flynn has lived in the neighborhood for years. She says this is just the latest blow to the community.
I'm just so tired of warehouses and houses and businesses burning down in the downtown. It makes me ill, actually.
Firefighters remain on scene assessing the damage. Smoke can still be seen rising in a couple places. And there's a crew here with fencing getting ready to secure the area. But what many people in the neighborhood are wondering is how long is this going to take to get cleaned up?
The fire at the Sutherland Avenue building comes nearly 5 months after another blaze. 3 businesses on Main Street burned down in February. The city has issued demolition permits for 2 of them, but the province ordered work to stop over concerns about asbestos. Mayor Scott Gillingham says environmental hazards could stall cleanup efforts again.
We don't know for sure, not knowing what all was stored at that site or what all was in the building that was burnt.
Area Councillor Ross Eady says the timeline for the cleanup is largely out of the city's hands.
When we end up with vacant derelict buildings, we don't even take care of them properly. Right? Because there's no money. That's why.
Dave Dixon owns an auto body shop across the street from the warehouse.
It's a blight. I mean, definitely for our city, it's not a nice thing. I mean, you know, I know they have to clean it up, but it's not going to be happening tomorrow.
Patricia Higginow worries it's just a matter of time before another fire.
My biggest concern right now is the fact that these buildings should be torn down. That way there's no way anybody can relight the fire or anything like that. We do have quite a few firebugs around here.
There's no timeline yet for the building's demolition. Police say so far they have not been called in to investigate. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Neighbours in North Kildonan left on edge by the attacks of 2 coyotes are breathing a sigh of relief. 2 animals have now been shot in response to those attacks on separate children in the area. But as CBC's Josh Crabb tells us, it will now take time to know for sure if the 2 animals were responsible for the attacks.
A Manitoba conservation officer and a trapper pack up after a patrol for aggressive coyotes in North Kildonan. Neil Lishka has lived in the area 9 years. He's used to seeing and hearing the animals, but the attacks are something new.
Mostly they just kind of walk by you, or they're very skittish, and it's just unfortunate that that these coyotes are causing a problem.
Staff Sergeant Graham Smith with the Manitoba Conservation Officer Service confirmed Wednesday a second coyote has now been killed in response to 2 recent coyote attacks on children.
The first one was shot on Monday by a conservation officer, and the second one was shot this morning by a conservation officer.
Both children were treated and released from hospital. Smith says officers believe they've killed habituated coyotes, but it'll be a couple weeks before they know for certain if either one was responsible for the attacks.
Our plan for those coyotes is to get DNA testing done on them and compare that with swabs that were taken from the wounds from the first attack and the clothing from the second attack.
He says the carcasses are also being sent to the University of Manitoba. Necropsies will be conducted to look for disease, the physical condition of the animals, and what they've been eating. Smith says coyotes can become habituated if they're fed by humans intentionally or get into garbage or pet food. The situation has prompted Manitoba conservation officers and a trapper to maintain a presence in the area. These signs warn residents wild animal live trapping is still in progress. Officers are still on the lookout for other habituated coyotes. Area resident John Belang feels better knowing those animals have been killed, but he wishes it hadn't come to this.
It is true. We're somehow taking their territory because we keep building houses, right?
The neighborhood backs onto a bushy field, and conservation officers believe it's home to an active coyote den. Residents know they will continue seeing the animals.
We used to have a lot of kids playing out here. As you can see right now, the street's pretty bare.
Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Winnipeg police are looking for a man in connection with an alleged sexual assault on a Winnipeg transit bus. Police released these images in the hopes of getting tips from the public on who this is. The man is described as being in his 40s, having short gray hair with an average build. Police say a 19-year-old woman was riding a bus in the St. Vital area on June 17th around 11 o'clock in the morning when a man she did not know sat down next to her. They say she told officers he then unexpectedly touched her lower body in a sexual manner. Anyone with information is asked to call the Sex Crimes Unit. The federal government's much-touted grocery rebate is now going to 11 million low and modest income Canadians and households starting today. It's a one-time payment billed as relief for high food costs due to inflation. Recipients say every penny counts, but as Karina Roman reports, they also say it's very temporary relief.
It's next to impossible to shop for your family, pay rent, daycare.
Any little bit of money in right now makes a difference for sure. I mean, I've been shopping so carefully and paying attention to prices for so long.
Recipients of today's grocery rebate welcome it, but many say the one-time supplement is not a long-term solution.
People are using the food banks. People are finding themselves in such a tight financial place that they are resorting to food banks to put food on the table and to feed their kids each and every day. Scary.
Eligibility is based on a household's income from 2021 and on the family composition as of January this year. So, a single person with no children could get a maximum payment of up to $234, or a couple with 2 children up to $467. Low-income seniors will see a rebate of up to $225.
Now, I know that will not make up for all of the impact of inflation that Canadians have felt. But for those who need help the most, the grocery rebate will provide some important breathing space at a time when people really need it.
Inflation dropped to 3.4% in May, but the food inflation rate remains stubbornly high at more than 8%. The NDP continues to push the government to go after the big grocery chains with an excess profit tax.
Inflation is being used as a cover to increase their profit margins.
The Conservatives blame Liberal government deficits for inflation, and they are calling for cutting the carbon tax to bring prices down. Karina Roman, CBC News, Ottawa.
John's away tonight. You know, it was a very comfortable day here in southern Manitoba, but parts of the north are seeing a little bit of shower activity. I'll show you that in just a minute, taking a look at your current conditions right now across the province. And as I mentioned, a little bit cooler today than we've seen in the past several weeks or so. 20 degrees in Winnipeg right now, 19 in Brandon. Thompson right now is at 22 degrees, where we have seen some scattered showers through northern Manitoba. Looking at our satellite and radar, you can see that it's been a fairly sunny sky out there. We're seeing a little bit of high-level cloud in parts of southeastern Manitoba. Otherwise, it's been a mainly sunny day. The north seeing some cloud cover as well. And if we look out into Western Canada, really not a lot to talk about aside for some showers in northern Alberta, northern Saskatchewan, into northern Manitoba. But otherwise, very stable weather pattern. Things could be changing, though, as we get into the next few days. As we look at Futurecast, you can see as we get into the morning on Thursday, we do see a line of instability moving into the province early in the morning tomorrow. The north getting another round of showers through the overnight period tonight into the morning tomorrow. The south, we will see some of that starting to move in as we get into the later part of Thursday here. You can see that we do have some showers, maybe some pop-up thunderstorms. You know, looking at some of the forecast models, it doesn't look like we will see any severe thunderstorms. The setup isn't quite there for tomorrow, but we could see some rumbles of thunder in the afternoon and evening Thursday. As we get into Friday, we see some showers skirting along the international border and another wave of instability through northern Manitoba into the early part of Saturday. Expect another 5 to 10 millimeters or so in parts of northern Manitoba. This is some much needed rain for parts of the north, which, as mentioned, have been dealing with some forest fires. Down to 10 degrees in Winnipeg tonight with a few clouds, light winds, 14 first thing in the morning, and in the afternoon tomorrow, mainly sunny with that risk of thunderstorms and 26 degrees. Some scattered showers to the north tomorrow, high teens to low 20s, your temperatures for the afternoon on Thursday, 26 in Brandon and Dauphin, that risk of a thunderstorm in Swan River and Portage La Prairie. And to the southeast, risk of thunderstorms in the afternoon tomorrow as well. Otherwise, a mix of sun and clouds, 26 in Winnipeg and Steinbach, 27 in Emerson, 23 degrees tomorrow in Barons River. And into northwestern Ontario, 22, 23 degrees under a mainly sunny sky, mix of sun and clouds. I will have your 7-day forecast coming up at the end of the show. Over the past 4 weeks now, we've been bringing you stories from our Mother, Sister, Daughter series. It's a CBC project looking at what, if any, progress has been made implementing the 231 calls for justice born out of the MMIWG inquiry. We found just 2 of them have been implemented. Most haven't even been started, including one that could dramatically improve investigations into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. For more, CBC producer Donna Carrero is here. You've been leading this project and joins me in studio. Hey, Donna.
Hi there, Riley. So I'm going to take you back to last fall, October 6th. In the early morning hours, Tristan Job's body was found on a golf course just inside the Saskatchewan border in Creighton, several kilometers from where she'd last been seen. Now, from the start, her mother, Val Charlotte, had a really hard time getting answers about what happened. No one, for example, could explain the bruising and the marks on the one side of her face or why she'd been covered in debris as if she'd been dragged somewhere.
And I thought, okay, she was choked. She was murdered. She had a lot of, her hair is very beautiful, very long, and it was very matted, full of leaves. The coroner was kind of drawing his own conclusions that he was describing that maybe she fell.
Wow. So Donna, Val, obviously she's not believing this.
No, she doesn't believe it. In her mind, officials were too quick to rule out foul play. There was no sense of urgency in the investigation in her mind, and there were too many unanswered questions like, how did she end up at that golf course way off the beaten path, far from where she was last seen? And to that point, Val also thinks there's not enough interest in the answers that she found during a special ceremony, for example. Elders told her that they'd had a vision that her daughter had been drugged by others, overdosed, and then left to die. And this is a common theme that's emerged in my interviews for these series, the idea that the truths that the families are bringing to the table aren't being heard. These are truths born out of their culture, they're born out of their ceremony, or even simply their gut instincts.
Can you give me an example, I guess, when you're talking about these sort of circumstances.
Yeah, you're right. Angela Lavallee. So in 2015, her granddaughter, Zaylin, she was just 9 months old when she died, some sort of trauma. The family say they think they know how she got those injuries. They also say they think they know who may have inflicted those injuries. Police, however, say the case is inconclusive.
So child welfare and Winnipeg police and policing and medical examiners need to listen when families or people are sharing experiences or saying, hey, this is what could have happened and this needs to be looked into. There's almost this narrative or this tone of don't tell me how to do my job.
So a lot of unanswered questions there, Donna, and not a lot of closure for these families. Why is it that they would like, or what is it, I guess, that they would like to see make a difference here?
So call for justice 9.9 would make a difference. So it's one of those 231 calls for justice that you referenced, that inquiry report that was released 4 years ago. Now, specifically, it calls for the creation of a national task force that would review and, if required, reinvestigate all cases of missing and murdered Indigenous children, girls and women across Canada. What's more, ideally, this task force would be Indigenous-led or at least have significant Indigenous representation. And that brings us back to that golf course where Val Charlotte's daughter was found and where, in cultural ceremony, Val believes the answers would have existed and that this task force would have paid attention to those answers. Angela Lavallee thinks that they might have actually then re-interviewed her and maybe taken her concerns more seriously about what happened to Zaylin.
Very interesting. Donna, thank you so much for all of your work on this series. Incredible work. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Still ahead tonight, the federal government says it's going to stop advertising on Facebook and Instagram. This after parent company Meta said it plans to block Canadian news content on those platforms in response to the recently passed Online News Act. The full story next. The federal government says it is going to stop advertising on Facebook and Instagram. That comes after parent company Meta said it planned to block Canadian news content on the platforms. Meta was responding to Parliament's recently passed Online News Act. It says tech giants should pay Canadian media outlets in exchange for using their content. Rafi Bujikanian reports.
After Google and Meta dug in their heels, a show of force from the federal government.
It can be intimidating, but are we going to let ourselves be intimidated?
Some $10 million in public money a year gone for Meta, the company running Facebook and Instagram. The latest salvo in an ongoing escalation since the government passed Bill C-18 last month with support from the opposition NDP and Bloc Québécois. The Online News Act would force Google and Meta to pay news organizations like the CBC every time a user lands on a news story online through using their services. Both have threatened to pull Canadian news links off their pages.
We're continuing constructive conversations with Google. Unfortunately, Facebook has just refused to recognize any sort of responsibility it might have.
Une personne sur deux au Québec ne verra plus les nouvelles.
And others are acting too. Cogeco, one of two media players in Quebec today to announce it is also pulling ads from Meta.
When you think about the whole industry, in Canada, it's 80% of digital revenue goes to Google and Meta. So, I mean, there must be some money for us.
The government's had warnings that tech giants would not play ball with the law, both from the companies themselves and from the federal Conservatives.
Google and Meta, otherwise known as Facebook and Instagram, have responded. And as a result, it's Canadians who have gotten harmed in the crossfire.
With Google saying it's willing to talk to the government about pending regulations, some observers have hope and questions.
What would a sharing kind of agreement look like? How can this really benefit, Canadian journalism? How can we strengthen, journalistic practice in Canada?
Showing just how hard it may be to get a snowball effect going, Trudeau's own political party, the Liberals, are not cutting ads on Facebook. Meta's revenues last year alone exceeded $116 billion, and so far it's given no indication it will change course on blocking Canadian news. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada has joined 3 other countries in launching a case against Iran at the International Court of Justice. Along with the UK, Sweden and Ukraine, Ottawa wants Iran held legally responsible for the downing of Ukrainian Airlines Flight 752. The plane was shot down by Iran's Revolutionary Guard shortly after taking off from Tehran in January 2020. All 167 people on board were killed, including 55 Canadians and 30 permanent residents. And as CBC's Ashley Burke reports, it is a long-awaited development for the families of the victims here in Canada.
After a long, hard battle for those who died on Flight PS 752, families say they have new hope.
What we asked for the last 42 months was a day in court, and now we see that this is happening.
Hamid Ismailian's daughter Rira and wife Parisa died when Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps shot down the plane more than 3 years ago. He and other families have pushed Canada to take Iran to the International Court of Justice. Today, they got their wish.
This is a happy moment for the families. I just witnessed the families, they hug each other, they cry out of pain and joy at the same time.
Canada, along with 3 other countries that lost citizens, filed this new joint application that says Iran violated its obligations under the international treaty and failed to take all practicable measures to prevent the unlawful and intentional destruction of Flight PS 752.
Ladies and gentlemen,
families met to discuss the next steps. They want high-ranking Iranian officials investigated and prosecuted.
The judicial system in Iran is not independent, so what have been done so far it has been just a sham trial.
The new application filed in court calls for Iran to be ordered to publicly apologize, fulfill its legal obligations, including prosecution or extradition of alleged offenders, and order full reparations for all injury caused.
I personally feel a slight relief in my heart, and I can next time I go visit my loved ones' graves, I can tell them that we did it, we finally did it, and we're moving forward. We're still fighting for you. We haven't forgotten, and you're still with us.
A joint statement from the 4 countries, including Canada, involved in this new legal filing, say that Iran failed to hold a full, impartial, and transparent criminal investigation. And they hope that the International Court of Justice makes that happen. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
All right, some beautiful sunflowers. I will have your 7-day forecast when we come back. Stay with us. Well, things are getting hotter across the world. This week, the Earth had 2 of its hottest days ever recorded. Environmental researchers in the United States say the average global temperature reached 17.18 degrees on Tuesday. On Monday, the average global temperature also passed 17. And although that may not sound like much, it is an average of the temperatures everywhere. Multiple countries have been enduring heat waves pushing 50 degrees, and Antarctica broke a heat record for July. And that brings us to a look at our 7-day forecast. As we get into the weekend, there is that risk of thunderstorms on Thursday afternoon, 26 degrees. Folk Fest for the weekend, I know we are expecting maybe a little bit of rain, 23 on Friday, 24 on Saturday. Chance of showers on Sunday and 23 degrees. Bit breezy on Monday, a high of 25, 27 on the way for Tuesday, and a sunny 25 on the way for next Wednesday. And that is all the time we have for you this evening. Thank you so much for being with us. I will see you again at 11. Have a great night.